It started on an ordinary Tuesday morning at the International Solar Observatory in Hawaii. The control room hummed with the usual sounds of cooling fans and beeping monitors when Raj Kumar nearly spilled his coffee all over the main console. His eyes widened as he stared at the readings flashing across his screen. At first, he thought the equipment was malfunctioning. It had to be. The numbers made no sense. "Hey, come look at this," he called out to his colleague Minji, who was sorting through yesterday's data reports. She walked over, still holding her tablet, but the moment she saw the screen, the device slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. There, clear as day, the sensors were picking up massive objects appearing near Mercury's orbit. Not asteroids, not natural phenomena. These were perfect geometric shapes, each one larger than Earth itself. The structures seemed to shimmer into existence one by one, like giant crystalline flowers blooming in the void of space. Raj's hands shook as he pulled up the visual feed from their most powerful telescope. The image made his breath catch in his throat. The objects were unlike anything humans had ever built or even imagined. They looked like enormous silver webs stretching out toward the sun, their surfaces rippling with patterns of light that seemed to pulse with an inner intelligence. Within minutes, every major observatory around the world was lighting up with the same readings. Phone calls were flying back and forth between research stations, space agencies, and government offices. This wasn't a glitch or a mistake, this was first contact, and it was happening right in Earth's backyard. Minji was the first to notice something even more alarming. "Raj," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "check the solar output readings." He pulled up the data and his heart sank. The mysterious structures weren't just sitting there, they were doing something to the sun. The amount of solar energy reaching Earth was dropping minute by minute. By afternoon, the news had broken worldwide. Amateur astronomers could see the objects with powerful home telescopes, and videos were flooding social media. Regular TV programming was interrupted as scientists tried to explain what they were seeing. Parents hugged their children close, religious leaders called for prayer, and world leaders huddled in emergency meetings. That evening, as Raj drove home along the coastal highway, he noticed how different the sunlight looked, slightly dimmer with an odd quality he couldn't quite describe. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages from family and friends, all asking the same question: what was happening? At home, he found his wife Priya glued to the TV, where experts were explaining that the alien structures appeared to be some kind of massive energy collection system. They were literally harvesting power from the sun, and in doing so, they'd already reduced the solar energy reaching Earth by 15%. "What does this mean for us?" Priya asked, holding their sleeping toddler close. Raj looked out their window at the strangely muted sunset. He thought about his years of studying the sun, about all the ways Earth's life depended on its steady light and warmth. "I don't know," he admitted. "But whatever these beings are, they didn't ask permission to take our sunlight. And a 15% reduction, that's just the beginning of what could go wrong." That night, few people on Earth slept well. In bedrooms and boardrooms, in farms and factories, everyone knew that everything had changed. Humanity was no longer alone in the solar system, and their mysterious new neighbors had already started taking what didn't belong to them. As Raj lay awake, watching shadows play across his ceiling, his phone lit up with an urgent message. All solar observatory staff were being called in for an emergency meeting at dawn. Something big was happening, and he had a feeling this was just the beginning of the most important story in human history. The changes came faster than anyone expected. Just 3 weeks after the alien structures appeared, the first frost hit Brazil's coffee plantations. Farmers stood in their fields, watching their crops wither under skies that never seemed to brighten fully anymore. Around the world, the story was the same. Wheat fields in India struggled, rice paddies in China yielded half their usual harvest, and orange groves in Florida turned brown. Inside the United Nations building in New York, world leaders gathered for what would become the most important meeting in human history. The usual political squabbles fell silent as the head scientist from the Global Climate Institute displayed her findings on the giant screen. "At current rates," she explained, pointing to a graph that made everyone's heart sink, "global temperatures will drop another 3 degrees by winter. We're looking at worldwide food shortages within months." In the back of the room, Admiral Patel of the Indian Navy watched silently. After 30 years at sea, He thought he'd seen everything. But now, watching the world's most powerful people struggle with the reality of their situation, he felt a chill that had nothing to do with the dropping temperatures. The vote was unanimous, something that had never happened before in UN history. Within hours, the United Nations Space Coalition was born. Every nation agreed to pool their military and scientific resources under one command. The petty disputes that had divided humanity for centuries suddenly seemed meaningless in the face of extinction. Admiral Patel found himself appointed as the head of the military response team. His first task was to visit the world's top research facilities, starting with the Quantum Physics Lab in Tokyo. There, he met Dr. Yuki Tanaka, whose team had been studying the alien structures non-stop since they appeared. "Look at this," Dr. Tanaka said, showing him detailed scans of the alien technology. "They're not just taking our sunlight, they're converting it into something else. Energy we've never seen before. If we could understand how they do it." Meanwhile, in neighborhoods around the world, people adapted to the new normal. Kids wore jackets to school in Singapore, where jackets had never been needed before. Farmers in Mexico planted cold-weather crops in fields that had grown peppers for generations. Community centers opened their doors as warming stations, and neighbors checked on elderly residents more frequently. The changes weren't all bad. For the first time in history, humanity had a common enemy, a shared challenge that transcended borders and beliefs. When China announced they were converting their largest shipyard for the Space Coalition's use, the USA immediately offered their best engineers to help. Russian rocket scientists flew to Cape Canaveral to work alongside their American counterparts. In Kenya, the director of the newly established African Space Center worked late into the night, coordinating with teams across the continent. They had something the rest of the world needed: the largest deposits of rare earth minerals essential for building advanced spacecraft. But it wasn't just governments and scientists who stepped up. Regular people found ways to help too. Retired engineers volunteered their expertise. Factory workers pulled double shifts to manufacture needed components. School children organized energy conservation campaigns in their communities. One evening, as Admiral Patel reviewed the latest reports in his makeshift office, his grandson video called from Mumbai. "Dada, when will the sun be bright again?" the boy asked, his face serious in the dim light of their energy-saving bulbs. The Admiral looked at the classified files on his desk, the plans for something called Project Inferno, possibly humanity's last hope. Soon, he promised, hoping he wasn't lying to the child. "We're all working together to fix this." That night, as city lights dimmed early to save power, millions of people stepped outside to look at the stars. The skies were clearer now, with less solar radiation to create atmospheric haze. Among those twinkling points of light, somewhere, were the beings who had started all this, and humanity was about to show them that taking Earth's sunlight had been a very big mistake. Deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, where the pressure could crush a submarine like a soda can, something incredible was taking shape. The secret facility had been built years ago as a backup plan for nuclear war, but now it served a different purpose. Behind walls of reinforced concrete and advanced shielding, Project Inferno was coming to life. "Another coffee?" asked Dr. Ravi, holding out a steaming cup to his colleague Dr. Zhao. They'd been working for 20 hours straight, but neither wanted to stop. The massive screens in front of them showed real-time calculations for what they hoped would become humanity's greatest achievement, Earth's first true battleship. The vessel they were designing wasn't like anything built before. Traditional rockets and weapons would be useless against beings who could manipulate solar energy. So they had to think bigger, much bigger. "Look at this," Dr. Zhao said, pointing to a simulation running on his screen. It showed their new fusion reactor design, a system that could theoretically harness the same forces that powered the sun itself. "If we can get this working, we'll have more power than all of Earth's power plants combined." But power wasn't enough. They needed a way to control it, to shape it into something that could make even star-harvesting aliens think twice. That's where Dr. Lee's team came in, working on gravity manipulation technology that seemed impossible just months ago. In the main construction bay, thousands of workers operated around the clock. Welders' sparks flew as they assembled the massive hull plates. Engineers crawled through half-finished corridors, installing systems that had only existed in theory before this project began. My grandfather helped build the first nuclear submarines, one young engineer told his team during their short break. He said everyone thought those were impossible too. But here we are, building something that would make those subs look like toy boats. Up in the observation room, Admiral Patel watched the organized chaos below. The project was burning through resources faster than any engineering project in history. Every country was contributing: African minerals, European electronics, Asian manufacturing, American aerospace technology. Even small nations sent their best people to help. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday morning. Dr. Ravi had dozed off at his desk when alarms started blaring. He jumped up, thinking something had gone wrong, but instead found his colleagues cheering. The test reactor had worked. For exactly 3.7 seconds, they had created and controlled a miniature star. "It's like bottling lightning," explained a technician to his family during his weekly video call, carefully avoiding classified details. But instead of lightning, imagine capturing a piece of the sun itself. In the cafeteria, worried conversations mixed with hopeful ones. Everyone knew they were in a race against time. Outside their underground refuge, the world was getting colder. Reports came in of snow in the Amazon, ice forming on African lakes. They had weeks, maybe months, before global food production would hit critical levels. The project wasn't without its costs. 3 workers had already died in accidents, their names now inscribed on a memorial wall. Every person in the facility had sacrificed something: time with family, personal lives, sleep, normal routines. But nobody complained. They all understood the stakes. One evening, as Dr. Ravi tested the final calibrations on the plasma containment system, his daughter sent him a picture from their home in Mumbai. It showed their backyard vegetable garden covered in frost, something that had never happened before in the city's history. "We'll fix this," he whispered to himself, touching the screen. "We'll show them they picked the wrong star to steal from." As Project Inferno entered its final phases, the massive ship began to look less like a construction project and more like humanity's ultimate statement to the cosmos. Its hull gleamed with a special coating designed to withstand solar temperatures. Its core hummed with power that humans had only dreamed of controlling before. They named it Surya's Light, Surya being the ancient sun god from Indian mythology. It seemed fitting, as they prepared to take back what belonged to Earth, that their ship would carry a name connecting humanity's past to its future among the stars. As Project Inferno raced ahead, the world above ground was changing in ways nobody had expected. Dr. Ravi noticed it first in the weekly video calls with his family. His teenage daughter Priya, once captain of her school's cricket team, barely left her room anymore. The constant dim light was affecting everyone, but teenagers seemed to be taking it hardest. "She won't eat properly," his wife explained during one late-night call. "The doctor says it's not just her. They're seeing hundreds of cases. They're calling it sublunar depression. The kids' bodies just aren't getting enough natural light." The news hit him hard. Here he was, working day and night on humanity's most advanced spacecraft, while his own daughter suffered. That night, he added a photo of Priya to his workstation. Every time he felt tired or discouraged, one look at her picture pushed him to work harder. Meanwhile, Admiral Patel faced his own battles in the command center. Reports from around the world showed the alien structures multiplying. What started as a 15% reduction in sunlight had grown to 20%. Agricultural experts predicted global food production would drop by 60% if things didn't change soon. "We need more time," Dr. Jao argued during an emergency meeting. "The containment systems aren't fully tested if we launch too soon." "Time is the one thing we don't have," the Admiral interrupted, pointing to the latest satellite images. "Look at these patterns. They're not just taking our sunlight, they're accelerating their harvest." In the ship's partially completed crew quarters, training sessions ran around the clock. The chosen crew members, 300 of Earth's finest, learned to operate systems that had never existed before. Many of them had been rivals just months ago: Russian cosmonauts, Chinese taikonauts, American astronauts. Now they worked together like they'd been a team all their lives. "My grandfather was a fisherman," one trainee told another during a break. "He used to say you can't fight the ocean, you have to learn to work with it. Maybe it's the same with the sun. We're not trying to fight it, we're learning to dance with it." The pressure took its toll. Dr. Lee collapsed one morning after working 36 hours straight. In the medical bay, they found his tablet still clutched in his hands, running simulations for the gravity control systems. Even unconscious, he kept mumbling equations. Personal sacrifices mounted. Dr. Ravi missed his 20th wedding anniversary. Admiral Patel wasn't there when his first grandchild was born. Dr. Zhe's garden, which she tended for 15 years, died in the increasingly cold weather while she worked below ground. But there were moments of hope too. During a test of the ship's power core, they managed to create a sustained fusion reaction for 5 minutes, longer than anyone had achieved before. The glow from the reaction lit up the whole facility, and for a moment, everyone stopped to stare. It looked like they'd captured a piece of the sun itself. "It's beautiful," whispered one of the technicians, "like having our own little star." The most touching moments came from above ground. Every day, the facility received thousands of messages from around the world. Children sent drawings of the ship. Elderly people shared stories of other times humanity had faced impossible odds. Farmers sent seeds, asking them to carry a piece of Earth with them into space. One morning, Admiral Patel received a video that brought tears to his eyes. It showed his granddaughter's first steps, taken in the dim light of their new world. The message attached read, "She'll walk under bright sunlight soon, Dada. We believe in you." The pressure to launch grew daily. Each new report brought worse news: failing crops, spreading illness, increasing panic. But they all knew the stakes. Launch too soon, and humanity's only hope might fail before it reached the aliens. Wait too long, and there might not be much of civilization left to save. As Dr. Ravi ran another system check, his phone buzzed with a message from home. It was a picture of Priya, smiling for the first time in weeks. She was holding a sign that read, "Make the sun shine again, Papa. I know you can." He touched the screen gently, then turned back to his work. They were almost ready. Soon, very soon, they would show these aliens that humanity wasn't ready to go quietly into the dark. Nobody expected the aliens to make contact first. It happened during a routine morning at the Global Space Communication Center in Australia. The night shift was just ending when every screen in the facility suddenly lit up with strange, pulsing patterns. "At first we thought it was some kind of interference," explained Technician 1, who was making his final rounds before heading home. "But then we realized these weren't random signals. They were mathematical sequences, more complex than anything we'd ever seen." Within hours, similar patterns appeared on screens worldwide. Television broadcasts, phone signals, even old radio equipment, everything received the same message. It was as if the aliens wanted to make absolutely sure they had everyone's attention. Dr. Ravi was woken from his first real sleep in days. As he rushed to the decoding room in the underground facility, he could feel the weight of history on his shoulders. His team gathered around their computers, working frantically to understand the alien mathematics. "It's like they're speaking in pure numbers," said Dr. Jao, her eyes glued to her screen. "Look at these patterns. They're using universal mathematical constants. They want to make sure any intelligent species could understand them." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A high school math teacher in Kenya sent a solution that helped crack part of the code. Then a retired physicist in Brazil spotted another pattern. All around the world, people joined in the effort, sharing insights and ideas. As the message became clearer, the room grew quieter. The aliens, calling themselves the Helios Collective, weren't just making contact, they were making demands. "They're saying the sun belongs to whoever can use it best," Admiral Patel explained to world leaders in an emergency video conference. "They see us as primitive beings wasting our star's potential. In their view, they have every right to harvest its energy." The message continued with what could only be described as a demonstration of power. New alien structures appeared, bigger than before, making the sky even darker. It was a clear warning: resist, and they could take even more. In the facility's break room, workers gathered around screens watching news reports from around the world. Temperatures had dropped another degree. In China, ancient rivers were freezing. African savannas were covered in frost. The message was clear: submit or freeze. "They think we're helpless," whispered a young engineer, gripping her coffee cup so tight her knuckles turned white. "They have no idea what humans can do when we work together." The Helios Collective gave Earth 48 hours to formally surrender all rights to solar energy collection. They included detailed scans of their technology, perhaps as a way to show how hopeless resistance would be. But their show of superiority had an unexpected effect. Dr. Ravi and his team pored over the scans, finding crucial information about how the aliens' technology worked. It was like they'd handed over their own blueprint. "Look at this," Dr. Zhao pointed to a particular section of the alien scans. "Their energy collection systems, they're efficient, yes, but they're also vulnerable. They never expected anyone to be able to fight back using the sun itself." In the ship construction bay, crews worked with renewed urgency. The Shuri's light was almost ready. Its systems, designed to harness solar power in ways the aliens never imagined, were complete. The crew, trained for months in its operation, stood ready. That evening, as the world waited for humanity's response to the alien ultimatum, Admiral Patel visited the ship's main control room one last time before launch. On the wall, someone had posted a child's drawing. It showed the sun shining brightly over Earth, with the words, "Bring back our light," written in crayon. He touched the drawing gently, thinking of his granddaughter taking her first steps in a dimmed world. Then he looked at the ship's main display, showing all systems ready. The aliens had made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed that humanity's relatively simple technology meant they weren't capable of surprising them. Tomorrow, they would learn just how wrong they were. The human race wasn't about to let anyone steal their sunlight without a fight. Launch day arrived sooner than anyone expected. The underground facility buzzed with a mix of excitement and fear as crews made final preparations. In the locker room, 300 crew members suited up in specially designed uniforms that could withstand extreme solar radiation. Dr. Ravi stood in front of his locker, holding the small photo of his daughter Priya. He'd been selected as the chief science officer for the mission. His wife had cried during their last video call, but Priya had simply said, "Make them regret taking our son, Papa." The Shuri's light waited in its massive underwater launch bay, its hull gleaming under the powerful lights. Unlike traditional spaceships, it looked more like a massive arrowhead, its surface covered in special panels designed to absorb and channel solar energy. "Remember your training," Admiral Patel addressed the crew in the final briefing. "We've got one shot at this. The aliens think we're going to surrender today. Instead, we're going to show them that humanity isn't as primitive as they think." The launch sequence began at dawn. As the massive underwater doors opened, seawater rushed in, filling the chamber. The ship's revolutionary propulsion system, powered by the miniature star they'd created, hummed to life. The sound vibrated through everyone's bones. "Think about it," one engineer said to another as they monitored the power levels. "This is the most powerful thing humans have ever built, and we did it in less than a year. Imagine what we'll do next." Rising from the ocean was the trickiest part. The ship had to breach the surface without being detected by the alien sensors. They'd chosen a remote part of the Pacific Ocean, far from the alien structures, but everyone knew they were being watched. As the ship broke through the waves, the crew felt a moment of pure awe. For many, it was their first time seeing their creation in natural light, even if that light was dimmer than it should have been. The vessel rose smoothly, its systems working perfectly. In mission control, Dr. Zhao monitored the readings with her team. "Power systems stable," she reported. "Fusion core maintaining optimal temperature. We're ready for atmospheric exit." The ascent through Earth's atmosphere was unlike any space launch before. No rockets, no massive fuel tanks. The ship's gravity manipulation systems and fusion power worked together, pushing against Earth's pull with unprecedented efficiency. Inside the ship, the crew strapped into their stations. They came from every corner of Earth: pilots, scientists, engineers, and specialists. A farmer's daughter from Vietnam worked alongside a former street kid from Brazil who'd become a brilliant physicist. Today, they were all just humans, fighting for their world. "Look at that view," someone whispered as Earth fell away below them. The planet looked different now, with large patches of white where there should have been green. The aliens' energy harvesting structures were visible as dark spots near Mercury, growing larger as they approached. Dr. Ravi worked at his station, monitoring the ship's revolutionary weapon systems. They'd only tested them in simulations. Using real solar plasma was too dangerous on Earth. Now, heading toward their first real combat, he silently prayed the calculations were right. The ship's AI assistant, programmed with voices from every human language, gave regular updates. Approaching lunar orbit. All systems functioning within expected parameters. No sign of alien detection. In homes around the world, people gathered around television sets and phones, waiting for news. The launch had been kept secret to avoid alien detection, but somehow everyone could sense something was about to happen. Parents held their children close. Students paused in their lessons. Farmers looked up from their frost-covered fields. As they passed the moon, Admiral Patel sent a brief message back to Earth. The light will return. It was coded, but those who needed to understand would know. Humanity's counterattack had begun. The crew settled in for the long journey to Mercury's orbit, each lost in their own thoughts. They carried not just humanity's hopes, but pieces of home, family photos, children's drawings, small flags, lucky charms. One engineer had brought a tiny jar of soil from his family's farm. For Earth, he'd said simply when asked about it, to remind us what we're fighting for. As Shuria's light approached Mercury's orbit, the true scale of the alien operation became clear. The energy harvesting structures weren't just big, they were enormous. Each one was larger than Earth itself, forming a web of silver and light around the sun. "It's like a spider web made of starlight," whispered one of the younger crew members, her eyes wide as she stared through the observation window. The alien constructs pulsed with stolen solar energy, each pulse dimming the light that should have reached Earth. Admiral Patel gathered the command crew for their final strategy meeting. The ship's holographic display showed their planned approach route, threading between the alien structures like a needle through fabric. "We'll use the sun's own magnetic field lines to mask our approach," explained Dr. Ravi, pointing to the curved path they would follow. "Their sensors are looking for technology they understand. They won't expect us to navigate like a solar wind particle." The ship's revolutionary engines shifted to their quietest mode. Every non-essential system powered down. In their quarters, crew members spoke in whispers, though they knew sound couldn't travel in space. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. On the bridge, the pilot, a former Air Force officer from Kenya, guided the ship with the precision of a surgeon. Her hands moved smoothly over the controls, following the magnetic field lines that only their advanced sensors could detect. "Like riding a river of invisible light," she said, her voice barely audible. Years of flying in dust storms over the Sahara had taught her how to feel her way through themes she couldn't see. Dr. Ravi worked frantically at his station, making final adjustments to the plasma collection systems. They'd only get one chance to demonstrate Earth's capabilities. If they failed, there wouldn't be a second try. "Look at their energy flow patterns," he noted, studying the alien structures. "They're so focused on efficiency, they've left themselves vulnerable. They never expected anyone to be able to manipulate solar plasma like we can." In the ship's common area, off-duty crew members shared quiet stories about home. A technician from India showed pictures of his village, now covered in unprecedented snow. An engineer from Brazil described how her city had started growing food in underground greenhouses. "My grandmother," she said, holding up her tablet showing an elderly woman tending plants under artificial lights. "She says we're like the plants now, finding ways to grow even without enough sun." The ship's AI gave them regular updates as they moved closer to their target position. Each update made hearts beat faster. They were about to attempt something never done before, not just by humans, but possibly by any species in the galaxy. "Their overconfidence is their weakness," Admiral Patel told his bridge crew. "They think they're so advanced that they don't need to watch for threats. Today, that changes." A young physicist from Indonesia monitored the sun's activity from her station. They needed exactly the right type of solar flare for their plan to work. Too small, and it wouldn't have enough power. Too large, and they might lose control of it. "There," she said suddenly, pointing to her readings. "A C-class flare is forming in the right region, if we time this perfectly." The crew took their battle stations. Years of scientific knowledge, months of intense training, and humanity's desperate need for survival had led to this moment. They were about to try catching and redirecting a piece of the sun itself. In the ship's heart, the fusion core pulsed stronger, matching the rhythm of the solar flares. They could see through their specially designed sensors. They weren't just fighting the aliens, They were about to dance with the most powerful force in the solar system. Dr. Ravi touched the photo of his daughter one last time before securing it in his pocket. Somewhere on a darker, colder Earth, she was waiting for the sun to shine properly again. They'd all had someone waiting. All stations, report ready. Admiral Patel's voice was calm and steady. Around the bridge, crew members confirmed their readiness. In a few minutes, they would reveal themselves to the aliens. But first, they had to prove that humanity had learned to harness the power of their star in ways the Helios Collective never imagined. The moment of truth arrived with the next solar flare. Shuri's light hung in space, its systems humming with power, waiting for exactly the right moment. Through the viewports, the alien structures loomed like giant silver webs, still unaware of the human ship in their midst. "Solar flare building in Sector 7, reported the Indonesian physicist, her voice tense with concentration. Magnitude reaching optimal levels, now. Admiral Patel gave the command they'd all been waiting for: activate plasma collection systems. The ship's special panels opened like flower petals reaching for the sun. Dr. Ravi's hands flew over his controls, directing the ship's revolutionary technology. They weren't just collecting solar energy, they were about to catch a piece of the sun itself. The flare erupted, a massive tongue of plasma larger than Earth. Instead of avoiding it, Shuri's light turned to face it head-on. The crew felt the ship vibrate as its systems engaged, creating a magnetic field unlike anything humans had built before. Like catching a river of fire with a magnetic net, Dr. Ravi muttered, making micro-adjustments to the field strength. Years of research, countless simulations, and humanity's desperate need had led to this moment. The solar plasma hit their field and curved around the ship exactly as planned. The viewing screen showed something incredible: a stream of starfire following their ship's commands, contained within their magnetic field. "We did it," someone whispered, breaking the tense silence. "We actually caught a piece of the sun." But they weren't finished. This was just step one. Now came the harder part, showing the aliens exactly what humanity could do with this power. The pilot turned their ship toward the nearest alien energy collector, their precious cargo of solar plasma streaming behind them like a comet's tail. That's when the aliens finally noticed them. Signals flooded their communication systems, first confusion, then warnings in mathematical code. The massive alien structures began to shift, turning their attention to this unexpected threat. "They don't believe what they're seeing," said the communications officer, translating the alien signals. "They're demanding to know how we achieved this level of solar manipulation." Admiral Patel's response was simple: "Let's show them." With precise calculations, they released their controlled stream of plasma. It struck the alien energy collector exactly where Dr. Ravi had predicted it would be most vulnerable. The effect was spectacular. The alien structure's perfect geometry distorted as the plasma overwhelmed its energy collection systems. Sections of it went dark, then began to power down. They hadn't destroyed it, that wasn't the plan. They'd simply proved they could shut it down if they wanted to. "Second plasma stream ready," reported Dr. Ravi, his hands steady despite the enormity of what they were doing. They'd practiced this thousands of times in simulation. Now it was real. The ship moved with incredible precision, demonstrating their control over solar forces that the aliens thought belonged to them alone. Each demonstration was carefully calculated, powerful enough to show their capabilities, but controlled enough to avoid any deaths. In the ship's common area, off-duty crew members watched the displays in awe. They were making history, showing an advanced alien civilization that humanity wasn't as primitive as they'd assumed. The aliens' response came quickly. Their massive structures began pulling back, retreating to a safer distance. The mathematical signals changed tone, from demands to something closer to respect. "They're asking for a pause in operations," the communications officer reported, her voice trembling with excitement. "They want to talk." Admiral Patel looked around at his crew, scientists, engineers, and pilots from every corner of Earth, all working together to save their world. In their faces, he saw not just pride in their achievement, but hope for what would come next. "Tell them we're ready to negotiate," he said, "but not until they restore full sunlight to Earth." As he spoke, another solar flare built behind their ship, ready to be caught and directed if the aliens needed any more convincing. On the main screen, they could see the alien structures continuing their retreat. Humanity had done the impossible. They'd made beings who thought they owned the sun realize they weren't the only ones who could harness its power. Dr. Ravi touched the photo in his pocket and smiled. Soon, his daughter would see proper sunlight again. They'd all would. The negotiations took place in a way nobody had expected, through a beautiful dance of mathematics and light. As Shuri's light maintained its position near Mercury's orbit, the alien structures arranged themselves in geometric patterns, communicating through forms and energy pulses. "They're showing us respect," the communications officer explained, watching the pattern shift. "By using our sun's light to talk, they're acknowledging our right to be part of the conversation." The first changes came within hours. One by one, the massive alien collectors began powering down. With each deactivation, more sunlight flowed toward Earth. The ship's sensors recorded every shift, confirming that normal solar radiation levels were being restored. Dr. Ravi worked with his team to translate the more complex parts of the alien messages. "They're not just retreating," he said, excitement in his voice. "They're offering to share their technology. They want to teach us how to harvest solar energy without affecting planetary systems." In the ship's common area, crew members gathered around screens showing live feeds from Earth. They watched in joy as proper sunlight touched their home planet for the first time in months. Cities that had been shrouded in twilight blazed with natural light again. The pilot wiped tears from her eyes as she watched footage of sunrise over Africa. "My grandmother always said the sun would return," she whispered. "She said we just had to be patient and clever." Messages poured in from Earth. First came the scientific readings, temperatures rising to normal levels, plants responding to the restored sunlight, weather patterns stabilizing. Then came the personal messages, thousands of them, filled with joy and celebration. Admiral Patel received a video that made even his military composure crack. His granddaughter playing in proper sunlight for the first time in her life, laughing as she chased her shadow. The Helios Collective, as they called themselves, proved to be different from what humans had imagined. They weren't conquerors. They were explorers who had never encountered another species capable of matching their solar engineering skills. They're like scientists who got so excited about their research, they forgot to check if anyone was living in their laboratory, one engineer explained to his family back home. "Once we showed them what we could do, they realized we weren't test subjects. We were potential colleagues." The ship's AI translated the final agreement into all Earth languages. The aliens would share their advanced solar technology, teaching humanity how to harvest the sun's energy safely. In return, they wanted to learn how humans had developed such precise plasma control in such a short time. "They're actually impressed," Dr. Ravi told his daughter Priya during their first clear video call in months. They said no species they've encountered has ever gone from basic spaceflight to solar manipulation so quickly. They called it remarkable adaptation under pressure. As the crew prepared for their return journey, they received one last surprise. The alien structures rearranged themselves into a new pattern. A bridge of light stretching from Mercury to Earth's orbit. It was their version of an honor guard, lighting the way home. Back on Earth, the changes were immediate and wonderful. The emergency greenhouses could finally close their artificial lights. Fields that had been frozen began to thaw. Children who had suffered from solar depression felt their energy returning. Dr. Ravi's daughter Priya organized a cricket match the day after normal sunlight returned. She hit the winning run and later told her father it felt like batting away the last shadows of the dark times. The underground facility where Shuri's light had been built wasn't abandoned. Instead, it became the first Earth-Helios Joint Research Center, where human scientists worked alongside alien researchers, learning from each other. Admiral Patel attended the center's opening ceremony. In his speech, he held up a child's drawing, the one that had hung in the ship's control room. "This was our inspiration," he said, "a child's simple wish to bring back the light. And in reaching for that goal, we proved that humanity's greatest power isn't our technology, it's our ability to come together and do the impossible when we need to." As the story of Earth's Inferno Battleship spread through the galaxy, other alien civilizations began to take notice of the small blue planet. Humanity had earned its place among the stars not through conquest or surrender, but by proving they could stand as equals with anyone in the cosmos.